Massive mountain ranges dictate precisely where plant life survives, creating strictly defined floristic provinces. The Sierra Nevada mountains force Pacific storms to drop moisture on the western slopes, creating a massive rain shadow. East of this crest, the Great Basin receives uniformly scarce rainfall. To understand how this arid climate fluctuated over millennia, geologists looked at closed basin lakes. Deep underwater, they found physical anomalies, ancient, fully rooted tree stumps. The annual growth rings on these submerged stumps tell us these lakes once dried up completely. This allowed trees to grow on the exposed lake beds for over a century before the water returned, terminating massive dry spells 1800, 1200, 800, and 550 years ago. But a tree stump in a single lake is an isolated data point. It proves an acute dry spell occurred exactly at that specific water source, but it cannot map the geographic scale or overall severity of the event across broader regions. How do paleoclimatologists measure historical moisture shifts across millions of acres of topographically complex terrain? We have to stop looking at individual trees. Instead, we track the mass migrations of entire plant populations by mathematically indexing fossilized pollen. We start at the ecotone, the sensitive boundary where two plant communities fight for territory. As moisture fluctuates, this biological border shifts back and forth. To capture a historical record of this battle, scientists extract deep sediment cores from anoxic lakebeds and fens. In these oxygen-deprived environments, millions of microscopic pollen grains accumulate undisturbed. Because sediment settles steadily over time, the physical depth of the core directly correlates to its chronological age. We translate a vertical slice of mud into a continuous timeline of plant life. The first major botanical player in this reconstruction is the Asteraceae, or sunflower, family. Sagebrush is a critical indicator species in this family. To survive and dominate, it requires a minimum of 150 millimeters of annual rainfall. In different environments, Asteraceae competes with the grass family, Poaceae, which relies on completely different hydrological conditions for its root systems. Raw pollen counts alone are not enough to build a reliable regional proxy. We must mathematically index the shifting ratios of these competing plant families across three distinct ecological boundaries in the Great Basin. Our first location is Pyramid Lake, a closed basin terminal lake sitting directly in the rain shadow of the Sierra Nevada. The primary biological ecotone here is the tension between sagebrush and saltbush, a member of the Chenopodiaceae family. The biological threshold is strict. Saltbush aggressively thrives in extreme aridity, surviving on minimal rain, right where sagebrush dies off. When a severe drought hits, the lake level rapidly drops, exposing miles of dry, highly alkaline playa. As the playa expands, saltbush immediately colonizes the newly exposed shoreline. This vastly increases its local pollen output relative to sagebrush. To neutralize background noise and isolate the moisture signal, scientists use a specific proxy, the sagebrush to saltbush ratio. A positive result indicates sagebrush dominance and wetter conditions, while a negative result indicates saltbush and aridity. This chart shows pollen data for Pyramid Lake over 2,800 years. The raw percentage columns for sagebrush and saltbush fluctuate constantly, but these percentages translate into a single normalized ratio on the far right, giving us a precise proxy tracking moisture over time. This signal carries a roughly 40-year lag, which is the biological time required for plant succession to physically occur on the exposed playa. The deepest sustained negative dips in this specific ratio prove the exact centuries when Pyramid Lake was reduced to a massive salt flat. Moving east into central Nevada, we examine Kingston Meadow. Here, the primary ecological variable is not an expanding shoreline, but the hidden depth of the water table. The competing taxa in this system are moisture-dependent sedges versus deeper-rooted grasses. Sedges demand shallow, standing water to dominate the meadow. Grasses easily take over when the water table drops. The hydrological health of this meadow is measured using the sedge-to-grass ratio. A positive value means sedge and a high water table. A negative value means grass and a dry meadow. Looking at proxy data from the Kingston Meadow cores, we focus on the period leading up to 20 years before present. Exactly at this moment, there is a sudden, sharp negative plunge in the ratio, driven by a massive spike in grass pollen. This botanical spike perfectly correlates with physical sediment evidence from the core samples, which show a drastic shift from rich organic peat to dry clay at this exact time. This rapid biological inversion from sedge to grass is undeniable proof that the meadow's water table completely collapsed. Our final site is Mission Cross Bog, a complex, high-elevation fen environment located in the Humboldt drainage. The flora at this altitude consists of Rocky Mountain subalpine firs and limber pines, bordering a lower elevation sagebrush zone. The biological tension here plays out vertically. We track the upslope expansion of drought-tolerant sagebrush against the downslope expansion of moisture-dependent conifer forests. We map this using the conifer to sagebrush ratio, which translates the pollen math directly into the elevation of the tree line. The bog's rapidly growing peat layers provide a high-resolution historical dataset. The timeline shows deep, sustained negative dips centered at 800, and again between 450 and 250 years ago. During these periods, drought-tolerant sagebrush pushed upward and dominated the high altitudes for centuries. In contrast, the era prior to 2,000 years ago shows an extended period of high-altitude conifer expansion, indicating much wetter conditions. This unique proxy tracks the physical, multi-century migration of entire forests up and down the mountainside, revealing climate pressures far deeper than simple rainfall totals. How do paleoclimatologists unify these disparate ecosystems, a desert lake, a central basin meadow, and an alpine bog, into a single climate consensus? This master comparative chart is the Palynological Matrix. It aligns the normalized y-axes of all the individual proxy graphs, standardizing the distinct ecotones into one timeline. Tracing the timeline, we look for synchronous regional events across all topographies. Notice the alignment at the 800-year mark. A simultaneous, extreme drought hit both the low-elevation rain shadow lakes and the high alpine fens at the exact same time. But look at the period between 2,500 and 2,000 years ago. Pyramid Lake shows maximum drought, while Mission Cross records deep wetness. This divergence is not a failure of the proxy methodology. It is a critical piece of evidence regarding the geographical origin of the weather patterns. Mission Cross Bog sits far enough north to capture Pacific Northwest storms. This wet and dry discrepancy between the sites proves that atmospheric storm tracks had physically shifted their latitude across the continent during that century. Cross-calibrating the ecological tension of pollen across multiple biomes allows scientists to move past simple confirmation of ancient megadroughts and definitively map the atmospheric mechanics that cause them.